What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Destination the Show. This is episode 65. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as always by the one and only Jeremy Nygaard. Jeremy, what's going on, man?
No, not a whole lot. Just got the Timberwolves game on in the background, and try to make it through the day. How are you doing?
The Timberwolves are sad. I'm not doing well for so many reasons, which is I feel like my standard response to you on here. It's been a one. So I have little kids. My kids are a little bit younger than your kids, and it has been a 1 day school week. They had off school Monday for a holiday, fine, and Tuesday was called because of the weather, and Thursday and Friday are also off per the district. So today was the only day they were at school this week, and it's been chaotic. It's not the days off, Jeremy. It's a combination of days off plus brutal cold. So I can't like kick them outside to just go entertain themselves in the backyard.
That's true. I feel like when you make a calendar though, and you set it up to have Monday, Thursday, and Friday off,
Cruel.
that's just dumb anyway. Like, why don't you have the PD days Thursday, Friday?
Right.
MLK Day Monday, so you allow
Agreed.
for that longer weekend.
Then people could go on vacation, quick trip to Florida, whatever you want.
Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because your standard response is always that you're not doing well, regardless of what's happening. My standard response is always like, yeah, good. Things are great.
That's
Even though
why.
they're
That's
not.
why we need each other, Jeremy. We balance each other out. But no, I'm excited to. You know what? Spring training, pitchers and catchers are reporting that date is coming ever closer, and that feels exciting because while there hasn't been much action from our team, there's still plenty to talk about. And this is going to be the first episode of a series of 3 in which we dig into top prospect lists for the teams that we cover the most. So excited for that. But before we do that, we got to do our usual, which is to talk through news and notes from around the league, particularly touching on the teams that we discuss the most. I guess the first thing, Jeremy, that's like, the league-wide sweepstakes that we talked about a week ago. Roki Sasaki, perhaps unsurprisingly, signs with the Dodgers. I don't want to spend too much time with that. Any reactions or fallout from that you find interesting or predictable, boring? Let's move on to the next thing.
Yeah, when it happened, I mean, I wasn't like surprised that it was the Dodgers. I was kind of hopeful that it would be the Blue Jays. That was
Right.
kind of my hope.
Same.
But the thing that, like, we talked about it last week too. Like, I suggested, hey, if you're going to go to another country and the two most famous ball players from your home country are there, you're just going to probably not overthink this, right? And just sign with that team. So it'll be cool. Like, it'll be a cool experience for him. I saw him. He was meeting LeBron and at the Lakers game. And today there was a tweet. I don't remember who had sent it out about how, he understands like the significance of these fires in LA because he lost his dad and his grandparents in the tsunami. What it was like almost 20 years ago. So just some of that stuff. And I think it'll be, like, there won't be this huge, enormous amount of pressure on him to succeed. There will be pressure for him to succeed because it's the Dodgers and they're supposed to win it all.
Yep.
But not like, that he's signing for $700 million and he's going to have to carry the weight of the world. He'll be able to just kind of fit in. So
No doubt.
hopefully it's a good story. I think I saw that he was the number 1 prospect on Baseball America.
Yep.
And so that's pretty neat for him. For the Dodgers, like you've said before, it's kind of played out now, overplayed maybe, about the Dodgers and everything that they're doing. So, it remains to be seen, and hopefully everything turns out well, and the Twins can somehow find a way to beat them in 7.
There you go. I'm excited to see him in action. Also excited to see if there's kind of some ancillary moves on the Dodgers' part, right? They now have obviously like a loaded roster talent-wise, and I find the conversation about good for baseball or not very boring. What's more interesting to me is the Dodgers have a very full roster in terms of just numbers, right? And so whether it's from their rotation, some of those kind of, I guess they would consider them back-end guys now, like Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, who don't have a ton of team control yet. maybe some guys from their bullpen. Maybe the Dodgers are looking to restock the bottom rungs of their minor league system with some trades prior to opening day. In fact, I would almost suggest that it's a must for them, given how bursting at the seams their player group is heading into spring.
Yeah, you got to think they're taking a bunch of calls at this point, right?
100%. 100%. So let's talk about the fallout, Jeremy, because that's relevant and feels interesting, right? We talked about the Jays as an option. Unfortunately, the Jays did not land Roki Sasaki, but they did have something to celebrate and something to pivot towards just a day or so later, signing Anthony Santander to a 5-year, $92 million contract with deferrals. There's an opt-out after the third year of that deal that the Jays can avoid by picking up Santander's 2030 option. So the Jays add some thump to their bat. They've been the bridesmaid and never the bride on several free agents this offseason. So your thoughts on the Santander pickup for them?
I mean, he's a good baseball player, right? So it's a good pickup for a team that wants to compete in the East. Do you think that signing happens if Sasaki picks the Blue Jays?
I don't know, because the Blue Jays, as we know, acquired a bunch more international money in addition to Miles Straw shortly before the Sasaki decision came out. I think it was $2 million, and they've since moved towards with signing guys that were already planned in that class, and I think bolstered some of their bonuses by the sounds of things. So I don't necessarily think the Santander signing would have been ruled out by a Sasaki one. It sounds like the Jays feel like they have room and want to continue to be aggressive in adding. Max Scherzer is a name that's come up and been linked to them. A couple of other bats. Pete Alonso certainly sounds like he's in the mix. And so I don't necessarily think it would have ruled them out of contention for Santander if Sasaki is signed with them.
All right. Because I would have thought, I was kind of the mind that, that they pivoted to make that move, even though the money isn't necessarily like here or, it's not coming from the same pot, it's here or here. But at the end of the day, you're allowed to spend so much international money. It all is going to come from the same coffers, right? Like, so in my mind, that's kind of the money's different, but really it's the same. So good for them. Any team from the East that's not the Yankees or the Red Sox that win in the East is fun for me. So I'm never against seeing the Blue Jays sign a good player, especially if they're going to help them beat the Yankees.
100%. So let's talk about another team, Jeremy, that we touch on plenty on this show, and that's the Chicago Cubs. Speaking of bridesmaids, they've come up a little bit short on some of their targets this offseason, despite having a busier early part of the offseason, of course, headlined by their acquisition of Kyle Tucker from the Houston Astros. The Cubs, Jeremy, were thought to be in heavily on Tanner Scott, who ended up signing a 4-year, $72 million deal with the Dodgers. That is just absolutely huge dollars for a relief pitcher. The Cubs miss out. Sounds like they're still thinking through and working through ways to upgrade the back end of their bullpen in addition to potential rotation upgrades after they missed out on Sasaki too. What do you think of that Scott deal? 4-year, $72 million, too rich for a relief pitcher? ? And should the Cubs maybe be relieved that they missed out on that one?
Yeah, for sure. It's way too much for most of the baseball teams, but with the Dodgers, it's monopoly money, so it doesn't feel like it's too much. For me, and I've said it all along, like you have to put work into your bullpen, but what you can't do is throw a whole bunch of money at the bullpen and just assume that it's going to be good. And so that's where, like, if you could sign a guy for 1 year, and even if it's an overpriced 1-year deal, like in my opinion, 1-year deals are rarely going to be bad deals, if ever. And
Agreed.
So 4 years and $72 million for so many teams, that would handcuff you. And not necessarily saying that it would handcuff the Cubs, but the way the Cubs have operated recently, is more as a small market team. So it's the Dodgers, but I don't hate for Cubs fans that this didn't work out for them, because in my mind that is a ton of money to throw at a relief pitcher, and those guys are good until they're not, and that happens in a hurry. And sometimes they're really bad until they aren't, and that happens in a hurry. So the more bites at the apple you can get, but when you're gonna plug that guy in for 4 years, that's a risk that most teams can't afford to take.
100%. And the other thing that I would argue from the Cubs' perspective, and maybe you feel differently, I'll be curious to hear your perspective here too, is there are plenty of high leverage relievers out there. And maybe the route that the Cubs take is trading for one, right? So names that they've been connected with: Yohan Duran of the Twins, Robert Suarez of the Padres, who sound like they're looking to offload salary. And we often talk about organizations like the Brewers and the Twins needing to build through drafting and player development. The same is not necessarily true of the Cubs. And I would also add that their minor league system, although very strong, is more like buoyed by guys in like the 40 to 75 range on top 100 lists, as opposed to high impact guys you simply wouldn't be willing to trade, that you feel really confident that are going to produce at the major league level. So maybe the Cubs' best option moving forward, Jeremy, is trade and dip into their farm system to acquire a high leverage guy. What do you think?
Yeah. And have we seen, I feel like we haven't seen a lot of off-season trades.
No.
Okay, so I'm not just
Nope.
I'm not just feeling that way and being wrong.
Nope.
Is this something that it's gonna happen when guys start reporting? Because I feel like making those trades at that point is trading too late.
Yep.
And we're pushing February right now, and it's like the activity, and a lot of times that's kind of the explanation, right? Oh, we're going to be more active in the trade market. What's happening with the market?
We've seen almost nothing, Jeremy, in the last few weeks. I mean, after the Cubs Tucker trade, we've seen very little in the way of major trades, and that's been even more so true for teams that haven't spent in free agency. So if we're talking about teams that we might call mid-market, right? So like the Brewers, the Twins, the Mariners, these are all teams that were heavily speculated about earlier in the offseason might make a trade, and none of them really have made any kind of a major splash so far.
Yeah, I guess Devin Williams going out.
That's true. Right? That's true.
But the Mariners, they haven't made a single. What's up with Jerry Dipoto?
Right. Jerry Dipoto in hibernation was not on my off-season bingo card for sure.
It's crazy.
Okay, well, one more piece of news, Jeremy, I wanted to talk through with you before we dig into our main topic for the day is Twins-related news, and another couple of hefty updates this week. One from Lavelle E. Neal of the Strib, another one from Dan Hayes, essentially underscoring a similar message that the Twins' transfer of ownership is relatively far along in the process, and the timeline, at least for knowing and understanding who's going to be getting the literal keys to the franchise, is opening day, with the Ishbia brothers said to be, quote, very, very serious contenders, and up to 10 parties at least interested, and 10 parties that had made some kind of inquiry. So it sounds like there's our at least ballpark definition of robust interest that we talked about just a few weeks ago here. Sounds like a decision is likely by opening day. How much does this excite you, given the Twins' absolutely stagnant offseason for the second year in a row?
I mean, it'll inject some life at a minimum, right? The Ishbias, though, will have to sell their part of the Tigers, right?
White Sox, right?
Is it White Sox or whoever?
I think it's the White Sox, yeah.
Yeah, they were Tigers fans growing up. Either way, that's going to take some time, I would assume. And I don't know that we even know what percentage they own. It might be pretty small, but
I think
that'll have to.
super small. But yeah.
first, right? But yeah, I mean, if that happens by opening day, I think that is exactly what the fan base will need. Opening day will be great. People will be there. People will be excited for the. I think. I guess you'll be there, right? You'll
I
be
will be there.
excited.
100%.
I'll be there. It'll be a fun day. 2 days later, when they, play again on Saturday, and there's 1,700 people there, things might be a little bit different. So, no, but at a minimum, change of ownership will inject excitement, inject some hope into a team that has done nothing for a long time, and it's frustrating. But I mean, part of it is with the TV deal, the collapse at the end of the year. There's just a lot of things that have been stacked against success. So hopefully things turn and make this year a little bit more manageable.
100%. Okay, that's a roundup of our off-season kind of updates for the teams that we're most interested in. We're going to move forwards and jump into the bulk of our show here, Jeremy, which is a dueling Brewers top 10 prospect list. We were going to originally do this last week. I'm super excited to get into the weeds with you now. So before we jump in here, I want to kind of give an overview and frame how we're going to do this. We haven't really talked about a format for this, but we're going to start at 1 and go to 10. And we will kind of alternate going first on introducing who we picked for a particular slot, give some rationale along the way, any key reasons why you picked a guy in a particular slot, and then we'll debate as we so often do, and I'm sure we'll disagree on plenty here. And then when we get to the end, we'll kind of summarize a little bit, maybe talk about some additional prospects that you and I both considered for the top 10 list who didn't make it, because 10 is a fairly small number, and then talk about guys who might be ready to make the leap this year and might be in consideration for next year. So are you ready to dive in? Do you want to go first or second? So I haven't seen your list, and you took a peek at mine, but I've since changed it slightly and removed it from the running order of the show. So we're not looking at each other's picks.
No, you did take it down.
I took it off because I felt like you had an unfair advantage getting to peek at my prep.
No, I feel like having to see yours, I was put at a disadvantage. Either way, we can go either way, because I feel like it's going to be what I feel like is going to happen is we're going to agree on the top 4 names in different orders.
Okay, sure.
Right.
Then it's going to be a mess.
Then we're going to have a couple names that appear on both of our lists from 5 to 10.
Okay.
And then, there's going to be a handful of names that one of us has that the other one doesn't. And,
okay.
and whether you change your list a lot or not, I feel like that's just the way that this franchise looks. It's 4 really good prospects, a couple others that are kind of on that chance of being top 100 guys.
I think that's fair.
Probably 8 or 9 guys that are in the next 200.
That makes me feel a little better. Okay, I'm gonna take the plunge and go first then on number 1, and then you can take number 2 first. So I really struggled, Jeremy, because you alluded to what I think is right, which is that there are 4 guys that separated themselves from the rest. They're all named on BA's updated top 100 list, which dropped today. So I'll name what position they're in there just as a point of interest. But they're all very different, like different level, different position, different kind of point in their career. So number 1 overall, I went for catcher Jefferson Caro. He was number 43 on BA's list. Just a quick summary here, 22 years old. The reason I was between him and one other prospect who I'm sure we'll get to, but he performed well at AA. He has the catching part of the skill set absolutely down. The arm and the fielding grades are a plus. Hit 262, 339, 440 at AA, 10% walk rate, 17% strikeout rate. That's pretty nice in both of those categories. 16 home runs in 90 games before a shoulder injury put him on the shelf for a whole heap of time in 2020.
The whole year.
So here was my pick for number one. Why don't we pause so you can talk about your guy, and then we'll kind of debate back and forth because maybe we're disagreeing right off the jump.
Yeah, I don't have the same guy. One thing that I say a lot is I'll always, maybe not always, but quite often I err on the side of upside. That's me. Um, so I will take guys that are like, hey, is it too early to rank them that high? And for
You're going
like,
Mate?
yes, Jesus Mate, number one, uh, 17 years old, has not made it stateside yet, which kind of goes against some of my rules, but 331, 458, 554. Okay. Um, 21 extra base hits, including 6 home runs,
Mm-hmm.
28 stolen bases. And the
Mm-hmm.
big one for me is in 51 games, 39 walks, 28 strikeouts,
Yep.
and plays a premium position. Right now, playing shortstop, I feel like he's probably going to be more likely to be a third baseman. Again, he's 17. Is the power going to come? It's hard to say. The floor is not the floor is significantly lower than these other three guys that we'll talk about.
Yep.
What the ceiling is, uh, could he be in the majors at an age younger than any of these other guys that we're going to talk about who are not in the majors, right? So
Yep.
17 years old, the Brewers did this last year. 19 years old and made it to the majors, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like is Mate within 2 years? That's hard to say, but there's a shot,
So
and
let
that's
me.
what
So I had Mate at two, and so let me add on a couple of points to what you said, and then I'm going to let you know why I didn't rank him at number one overall, and you can tell me if you think that's at least a fair kind of consideration. So for what it's worth, in BA's list, which dropped today, they had him at 17 as opposed to Caro's 43. So they're absolutely siding with you. They graded out his tools as a 60 for everything except fielding, which they gave a 50, which is wild. And so I do want to hit on this and reiterate this because I'm in agreement with you, Jeremy. It just comes down to like a slight difference of opinion about right now. The ceiling here is the number one overall prospect in baseball for Jesus
yeah,
Mate.
yes,
That's what we're talking about if he hits. It's Jackson Churio esque. Um, you ran through all of his stats that translated into an 18% walk rate and just a 13% strikeout rate, 169 WRC plus. Um, Here's my couple of counterpoints or things to consider. One, and this is more of a statement than a question or a point of the debate. I feel like Made is a little bit of an acid test for aggressively ranking international prospects. Because what we've seen traditionally and typically in the industry, in my opinion, is a lot of guys put their hands up and say, I am not going to aggressively rank a guy who hasn't played on US soil yet. And I'm not saying that there's merit to that or not. I'm just saying that that's a general approach that folks have taken. It's likely, I think, that he skips the complex league this year and goes straight to A ball, which will be a significant step up. I struggle with contextualizing the numbers in the DSL, and I'll give an example from a prospect who you know I love, Eduardo Beltre of the Twins, right? So almost the same sample size, higher WRC plus and a higher OPS for Beltre over Made in the DSL, and Beltre is nowhere near industry top 100 lists, right? And so that's obviously like a really simplified, dumbed down argument to make because if you dig into Made's data, his batted ball data, his exit velocities, these are the things that are separators for him, and we haven't really discussed that in depth. But it's just a point I'm trying to make around the kind of fickle nature of how guys who have performed in the DSL seem to be ranked. So throw it back up to you. Do you think there's any merit to that kind of argument of not being aggressive with guys who haven't played in the U.S.? Do you think there's a place to? Do you think there's a place to make an argument for Caro, who also plays a premium defensive position with outstanding defense at catcher for the number one spot.
Sure. I think you can make that same argument for the other three guys that aren't number one for me. Okay. And the big thing for me why I didn't have Caro number one or number two or number three.
That's fine.
Is because he didn't play last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's hurt.
Fair.
And so now you have a shoulder thing. And we've seen so many catchers like fly through and get to a point where they're going to be the next big thing. And all of a sudden they hit a wall and the bat's not good enough and the fielding just isn't advanced enough. And now they've amounted to nothing. And so in my opinion, like you already are fighting against that as a catcher, that now being injured and having to come back and kick off a year of rust, that's also a problem. And so I was lower on him last year when we did this as well. And so that to me too is like he didn't do anything. He literally didn't do anything to up his stock, and he's still number one. Like to me that's just harder. So yeah, I mean he's in the mix because of what he's done in the past. But at this point, 22, missed a whole year. There's not as many question marks because he's done it at a relatively higher level. But Made just like it's this right now for him.
Yeah.
So that's you could have said Pratt, you could have said Mazeroski, like, and I would have been like, okay, yeah, that's fair. Those four guys in any order, it works. I went high upside, highest upside, 17 years, and the bottom could completely fall out. But to me, it's a fair argument for any of these four guys.
So let me put one last statement on our opening two, or our not opening guys, then I want to come back to you for your number two choice. If we fast forward to the middle of May, end of May, beginning of June, and Made has had a strong start at A-ball, I think this debate is no longer a debate, right? And so one of the reasons I picked Caro was exactly what you said. He's shown performance at AA, but I think this is a conversation that can be absolutely moot in just a couple of months here. Jeremy, who was your guy who you picked at number two? Because you said you have Caro at number four, which really leaves two possibilities for you at two, and I want to know who you picked and why.
Well, I think given what I've shared, given what you know about me, that I went upside again, right? We're big Cooper Pratt fans. When he got drafted, thought for sure there's no way that the Brewers were going to be able to pull that off.
I know.
They did. He's 20 right now. He'll turn 21 at the end of the year. 277 combined in two levels. Hit only 8 home runs. Did have significantly more strikeouts than walks. But at 20 and can hit, can run, can kind of do a little bit of everything. The comparisons to Gunnar Henderson have been kind of spot on at this point. Also, don't necessarily think he's a shortstop because the Brewers love third baseman and they could play all third baseman. But he's my number two, but much closer to 3-4 than he was to 1 for me.
Fair enough. Yeah. So let's just so I have Pratt at 3, right? So we're close there. Came in at number 50 on BA's top 100 just today, which I think sounds about right. 126 across the 126 WRC plus across the levels he played at last season. I believe he got a very late season call up to Biloxi to AA. I don't know if he played there, but he did get called up there. Absolutely a plus arm, which ought to keep him at shortstop, at least for the time being. Really exciting, just like solid overall production. As you say, Jeremy, 10% walk rate, 20% strikeout rate is just fine. And he really contributes with every one of his tools. So easy to make a case that he's in for an exciting 2025.
And I will say this, like when Baseball America updates and they do periodically throughout the year, more regularly than other places.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Mate at 17 limits his ability to jump high, right? He
For
can
sure.
only improve 16 spots. For the four guys that are at the top, I think that Pratt's got the best chance to make the biggest jump early.
Yep. Fair.
And again, that's an upside thing for me, and that's why I had him 2, 3. Yep, that's fine. If he was even at 4, I don't think it's splitting hairs, because these 4 to me are just, they're separate from the rest.
Yep. Okay, why don't we move to my number 4, Jeremy, which I'm going to predict is going to be your number 3. And interrupt me if I'm off base, but I think we're spot on. So my number 4, your number 3 is Jacob Mizorowski, right-handed pitcher, listed at 6'7", 190, which is bizarre. He came in at 44 on BA's Top 100 today, so just 6 spots ahead of Cooper Pratt. If we're talking scouting grades on Mizorowski, you'd give him like an 80 fastball, 70 or 80 fastball, 70 slider, and then like 40 control, and like we're not feeling great about a third pitch yet, maybe the cutter, maybe the changeup. Struck out 30.5% of hitters last year, but walked 14.4%. And so here's something I want to lean into with you. And you, I think, illustrate this beautifully all the time with batters, and I think it stands true with hitters too, right? Where you say, you know what, the first thing I look at is walks and strikeouts. K percentage minus ball on base percentage for pitchers is a great jumping off point for analysis. And Mizorowski's isn't good because he's walking 15% of guys. And he's dominant. He strikes out a ton of dudes as a whiff machine. It was a 392 xFIP across AA and AAA in 2024. And I think like the burning question with him has to be, Jeremy, starter or reliever in 2025. What you doing with him?
If I'm going to start him to start the season, simply because if that takes off, and you keep him stretched out, if he's a reliever right now, you can put him in the back of your bullpen.
Yep.
The hard part is that you have to give him the keys to the inning before it starts, because you can't bring him in with runners on, because he's going to put more runners on.
Yep.
Which is why I would just as soon start him, let him create his own mess every inning, and try to get out of it. You could always make that transition from starter to reliever. If you want to start to limit his innings at, in July or August or September or whatever, I don't think he threw 100 innings last year, 97. So he doesn't have that ability to just come in and throw every 5th or 6th day all year. But I'm certainly going to start him to begin the year, try to figure out if there's a usable third pitch, and then at some point it's going to be he's a fastball, slider, control issue. We'll put him in the bullpen, but if he can just do that, he'll be a dominant back end guy.
Yep.
With Williams having been traded, the 9th inning is wide open. It makes sense that he would be that guy at some point. I can't do it early because you dream on an arm like that. And I mean, when you look at Duran as a prospect, he started, and I was like, okay, that's fine. Let's think about using him as a starter again. And that never happened. And it's worked. So if they decide to go closer or reliever and it works out, they can keep him there. I just think there's too much value in him potentially as a starter if he can get this figured out, which I don't think he can.
Yep. Fair. And I'm 100% on board with that approach. I agree. And you trust in the Brewers pitching development, right? Like they have a track record of being really good at this stuff. And so if you were to drop 5 organizations in a bucket that you feel confident can help Mizorowski improve his strike throwing ability, and while it hasn't happened to date, maybe how they would want it to, I would argue that Milwaukee would be in that handful of organizations, along with maybe like Cleveland, Seattle, whoever else that you want to mention. So Jeremy, before we move on to number 5, and I'm going to ask you to name your 5th guy first, fair to say that there's a clear top 4 here and then a fairly significant step down in terms of impact, ability, however you want to describe it, to the next cluster of guys. Is that kind of your read on the system as well?
Yeah, 100%. Like I would put these 4 up with really any 4 that any organization could offer.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, I think we could come up with probably 9 or 10 different names just for this 5th spot, right? And I think
100%.
that's where the drop off occurs. So
So
yeah, I
drum
mean,
roll, please. Who you got at number 5?
so my 5th guy, someone that made his major league debut wasn't great. Tyler Black.
Yeah, same.
He didn't have a great year overall last year, but I do think that he's a major league regular, which I can't necessarily say about anybody else that's in their organization. So as much as I like upside, when the floor is higher, which in this case I believe it is,
Yep.
That just it gives you an opportunity. He's listed as a first baseman right now. Let me get over here. Hit 14 home runs in AAA last year, only 0 with the Brewers in 18 games. But I think he'll get more of an opportunity to do that this year, and doesn't wow you with anything, but does have a decent hit tool. Probably won't hit for the power that you'd like a first baseman to hit for, but the Brewers seem to figure that out most of the time with their good hitters. And so for me, Tyler Black, but not significantly better than anybody else on this list. It's just the
All right. So we've had a technical issue. Jeremy, we've had a technical issue, and the podcast recording was accidentally paused, possibly when you were mid-flow about Tyler Black. So if this comes across as weird, this is what happens when producer Theo is not here. Things go wrong technically. So we apologize. Back to Tyler Black. I feel like he's a little bit positionless, Jeremy, right? He's been listed as a first baseman and a DH. Small sample size at the MLB level, as you mentioned, but he doesn't necessarily have the offensive impact to carry off first base or DH. It's a good approach, 13% walk rate, just 18% strikeout rate, but it's light on bat speed and it's light on in-game power. So I just where are you going to put him in 2025? And I agree with you that he's a contributing regular, but he also doesn't jump off the page like some of the other guys that we're talking about today really do in terms of their potential impact if they kind of pop.
So, I mean, is there a chance he ends up at second base? He's got speed to play.
He does.
You don't really need to have a great arm to play second. Like that's what they've done with other guys historically too. So I don't know. I think that there's a Major League Baseball player in there that could be a regular somewhere, and that to me is enough in this list of prospects for him to be number 5.
Right on. I'm just looking up where Zips has him at first base. They have Turang and Chad Durbin switching off second base, and then Joey Ortiz in at shortstop, and that certainly makes sense defensively. I don't think Tyler Black's defensive skill set is really gonna push the needle for him past either of those guys. So that remains a problem for him. But hey, Jeremy, we're doing pretty good. We have had the same 5 in a different order, and we've matched up on prospect number 5. So we're moving on to number 6 now, and this is where I think we're going to diverge or start diverging in a more serious way. And I'm going to go first here, and okay. I think this is maybe going to surprise you. So my number 6 guy is a guy who they took with their first pick in the 2024 draft, which is Braylon Payne. Okay. Who is a left-handed hitting outfielder. He was 17th pick in the 2024 draft. Prep prospect, signed for around a $3.5 million bonus. fair to say, I think, Jeremy, if we can recall that draft night, one of the first major surprises of the first round where we were both like, whoa, didn't see that coming. Is that your recollection too on Payne?
Yeah, 100%. And then he played 4 professional games. So for me, and I'll let you tell me why I'm wrong, but when the guy shouldn't have gone where he went because he wasn't highly rated, and then played 4 games, although he did have 7 hits in those 4 games, that to me is not enough to really put him on there. So you're not going to hear me say his name in the top 10. So
That's
yes,
fine.
I am surprised that you have him as high as you do.
So he played in like the Bridge League or whatever they call it after he was drafted. He did get more game time in the Brewers org. It's just it doesn't show up on his like minor league page or whatever. But the scouting report that I would kind of allude to with Payne is outfielder, like plus to double plus speed. And so here's the bet that we're making. And this is a prognostication that could make me look really, really dumb in 6 months, but it wouldn't be the first time, so why not? I think that the hit tool and the bat speed and the impact on his batted ball events is going to be much better than was advertised in his pre-draft scouting reports. So his pre-draft scouting reports kind of alluded to like he's a little bit of a slap hitter, like he's just going to use his speed to like get on the bases and cause havoc, and I think all of that is true. But per the Brewers player development account, he was also cranking out some pretty impressive exit velocities after he was drafted for the Brewers, admittedly like at a low level and not yet an affiliated ball. So I'm making a bet that the bat is better than advertised, and he's not just going to be like a slappy singles hitter. He's going to get to 10 to 15 home run power and a ton of doubles and triples, leveraging that speed. So he's my guy at number 6. And I guess I'm doing with Payne what you did with Made, which is betting on upside, betting on tools. And I'm excited to hear who you slotted in at 6.
I will tell you, but do you ever like read a like a scouting report and then just have like visions of other players?
Yes.
Okay.
And I fight that because I hate comps.
I know you do, which is why I'm doing this. Obviously 6'2", a little more longer than mine, but when I read the report on him, you know who I get, you know the vibes I get?
I do not.
Ben Revere.
Right. And that's what I think he's not going to be.
Right. And I think that, but if the power doesn't develop, okay, which I feel like when you have a different frame, Ben Revere was like of the Kirby Puckett frame, right?
Yeah.
When he was a high schooler. And Kirby Puckett then developed all the power. Ben Revere didn't. The weak arm thing. Like Ben Revere probably would have been better off at second. It just didn't make sense, with the speed. Braylon Payne has the speed, so doesn't have the arm. Like 45 arm, yeah. Like to me that's not concerning, but there's just a lot of things where I was like, okay. And I'll be honest, Ben Revere as a prospect was super fun. Like flirted with 400 in the season, right? And was a spark plug type player, and that's what Braylon Payne hopes to be. So I do think there's like that with the ability to be, more power, maybe a better defender just because he's going to be able to cover more ground with the speed. But that's the vibe I get. Anyway, for my number 6, I went upside with, and help me if I'm saying this wrong, Yolfrey Rodriguez.
Yep.
So a 19-year-old, 6'1", 185 pounds, pretty much average tools across the board at this point. Played in A ball for Carolina and had 36 extra base hits, including 7 home runs. Struck out 115 times, which I don't love.
But he walks a decent amount too.
Yeah, 59 times in 110 games.
12% is pretty solid.
Not a ton of speed as far as in-game speed, seven stolen bases. But I think, again, there's upside there. Lefty, signed for, what does it say, 100 million and a half in 2023.
Yep.
And so he's been moved along quicker than I think a lot of teams would maybe move a guy like this along. If he has even a average season this year, he'll be in top 100 lists for sure. So, but to your point, Braylon Payne could do the exact same thing. So I think what we're looking at pretty similar. I'm guessing Rodriguez will be in your top 10.
Yes.
But that's where I went upside again. And given the Brewers' success with pushing some guys through, like they've recognized this, they've done well with it, and Rodriguez could be the one that kind of flies under the radar because Churio's there. Now Made's the next big thing. Rodriguez can just kind of, float and make his debut as a 20-year-old that no one really talks about.
Yeah, dude, I love that pick, and I 100% agree with you. As soon as you said his name, you prompted me back to that comment you made, right? Of like Cooper Pratt could be the guy that flies up the board the most. Rodriguez, for me, is a guy that is one of the most likely dudes who is not on top 100 lists to be on them with, as you say, even like a solid 2025. 117 WRC plus as an 18-year-old at A-ball over 110 game sample is just really, really solid, especially showing slightly above average power. Chance to be kind of like a 2020 guy potentially if everything works out for him. So I had Rodriguez at 8, which is within the same range. You had him at 6. So why don't we scoot back now to 7? I'm very curious to see if this guy's on your top 10 list at all. Anything else on Rodriguez before we touch on number 7?
No, I'm ready to go to 7.
Okay. So in number 7, I had someone from the third base mold.
Me too.
But not the guy that I bet you have in the third base mold, because I left off one of their significant guys who just missed so much time in 2024. I have Mike Bovee at number 7. He was a 2023 draftee who had out of the University of Omaha, who just had some of the best hitting skills of any bat in the draft, coming out of a smaller school. 79 games in 2024, across high A and double A, a 161 WRC plus, 12% walk rate, just 16% strikeout rate. It's not a ton of impact. It's not a ton of power, right? It's 6 home runs, 15 doubles in that sample size. The question is going to be how much offensive impact does he get to? But there is absolutely no doubt the hit tool is legit. It's a legit plus hit tool. It's one of the better hit tools in the minor leagues, in my opinion. Jeremy, did you have Mike Bovee on your top 10 anywhere?
Yeah, number 8.
Okay.
I actually had him at number 7. And then when I had these two guys next to each other, I had to make the switch, even though the guy that I have at 7 was significantly worse last year.
Okay.
And I'm guessing you don't have him on your top 10. So my number 7 is Brock Wilken, who was god awful last year.
Yeah, he was.
And
had a bad injury, mind you, fractured cheekbone, I want to say.
Yeah, which makes you a little hesitant to stand in a box.
Right.
Wore a soft looks like he's wearing a softball helmet when he's playing, which is weird. Yeah. He was just too good at Wake for me to just totally disregard.
Yeah.
And so he's gonna hit for power. He looks the part. I had him at 8, and I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna discredit him that much. I did it with the catcher, right? When we're talking about being number 1, but I think Wilken is going to be someone that's just maybe not given the respect that he's earned because it was a bad year, and I do think that he's going to bounce back because of everything he did prior to that, right? And so he was my number 7, but really anybody again in this area, they're all within the same couple of steps.
I agree. I agree 100%. Wilkin was on my just list, dude. So I really had only kind of two additional guys I was considering for the top 10 who I didn't list here. And I went through iterations where they were on it. And I think that's one of my prospect ranking biases is struggling with recency bias. Like if you don't, and having ranked Hefson Caro at number one, but if you, I mean, I just Wilkin was out of sight, out of mind, and bad, that combination,
Right.
as opposed to out of sight, out of mind, and good, which at least Caro was, right? And so that's
Yep.
I guess the differentiator for me. So Wilkin, hoping he has a bounce back season. We were both big fans of him and like that pick a ton for the Brewers coming out in 2023. The last thing I'll say about Bovey, I need to get right on that pronunciation, is he has similar questions to Tyler Black to me, which is there's not a ton of defensive positions where you can get away with having an amazing hit tool and absolutely no power. And perhaps his kind of like line drive doubles power with like, I don't know, 10 to 12 home runs per season is enough, but I do wonder where he's going to factor in defensively. Like in college, he played third base. He's listed as first base, third base. He doesn't really have the kind of offensive impact in a similar way to Black for you to feel comfortable, putting him in at first base and be like, well, there's like Santander-like power there. We're good to go. So that's my other wondering about Bovey is like, what is going to be his defensive
Second base.
Okay. We'll see. Okay, that leaves us, Jeremy. I think we've both gone through 8 names in various orders. We're on to number 9. How about you take it away for number 9, and then I'll round us out with number 10.
So, because we only did a top 10, there was a couple names that I had to have in on my list, which maybe if we would have done a top 15, it wouldn't have been in the top 10. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
names that I had to recognize. And so one of them is a pitcher.
Okay.
Who was drafted in 2023.
Okay.
I was a big fan of coming out of the high school ranks. He wasn't great this past year, but he did throw 84 innings in his pro debut. Josh Noth, who was pitching in Carolina, so straight from high school to A ball.
Yep.
Win-loss record of 4-6, ERA mid-4s, struck out 96 in 84 innings, walked a ton, walked 40. WHIP was 1.4. You'll probably have more data back there that can tell me why this is not great. But the Brewers love guys that can spin the ball.
Yep.
And he can absolutely do it. A little bit undersized, listed 6'1", 190. But there's going to be some development here. His fastball's not great, but his curveball and slider are. And I think that when you can throw multiple pitches, you can always develop that fastball a little bit more. He's just got to throw strikes. And so he's young. What's he right now? 19. He'll be 19 all season, and probably playing at high A. And I think that's a pretty good push for a kid that's only 2 years out of high school. So Josh Noth, who probably isn't going to show up in top 10s anywhere for the Brewers, but someone that I was a big fan of when they drafted him, and I think there's a chance that he will still develop, and maybe not ever as like a front of the line guy, but someone that could probably, if needed, be like a number 3 or 4. And when you have that arsenal, I think he could also be a pretty lethal in the bullpen.
Yep. Like that pick. He did not get in my top 10, but I mean, we could repackage that and say he's another great candidate for who might be one of the most likely Brewers breakout prospect candidates this season. Because as you say, the stuff is there, the traits are there. I want to say it's like a 3,000 plus RPM curveball, undersized. The scouting comp I actually liked for him was like Lance McCullers starter set for Josh Noth, which just like as a general proxy for like undersized guy who throws hard enough to spins the ball really well, which I think is at least solid. So that makes a ton of sense. I'll give you my number 9, and I grappled with this one because I did not like this guy, the prospect coming out of the draft at all. I was just low on this guy. I ranked Eric Batanti at 9.
Okay.
Third base prospect, 6'4", 220, left-handed hitting, 79 games across the complex in A ball. He hit 282, 402, 544. That's good for a 946 OPS, 148 WRC plus, pardon me. In 79 games, Jeremy hit 16 home runs and 23 doubles. Walks a ton, 16% of the time, but also strikes out so much, 30% of the time. He's like really close to kind of a 3 true outcomes guy. Like he's like Adam Dunn. Like he's either hitting the ball a million miles, or striking out. Likely to start at A or high A this year. When he debuted, and I could be misremembering this, he debuted briefly after he was drafted in 23, and I think he looked bad.
Yes, he was bad.
And then last year, it's just an absolute transformation. He was just crushing. And I do think the strikeouts are a challenge and something to monitor, but very impressed with how, as I think 19-year-old, he handled the complex and A ball, and certainly a really like momentum building season for Eric Batanti, such that I had to throw him on at the back end of the top 10.
He didn't make mine, but he was one of the 2 names that,
okay.
Well, one of 3 names that I considered for number 10.
Okay. Let's hear your. Well, I guess it's me for number 10 for us, huh? Because we're switching out here, and then we'll quickly hit other names considered in a couple of other last questions. So number 10, I just had to shoehorn this guy in. Starting pitcher, 22 years old, right-handed, undersized. Because of performance and proximity to the majors at this point, it had to go with Logan Henderson in my number 10 slot. He pitched 81 innings across AA and AAA mostly last year, a 326 xFIP, struck out 33% of guys, and walked just 4.7% of dudes. So you're looking at like a K minus walk percentage of like 29.3, which is absurdly good. Plus fastball, really incredible changeup, a solid slider that has made really good progress, and an excellent strike thrower. I think he is poised to contribute to the Brewers major league team in 2025.
Yep, he was the other name that I considered but didn't have. That's a super impressive year. I mean, that's like Zebby Matthews pitched at all the levels all the way up, and then just not making his debut. I would be shocked if he doesn't pitch quite regularly for the Brewers this year. I went with a higher upside pitcher.
Okay.
Shocking. And this was a guy that we both, I think, were big fans of coming into the draft.
Latson?
No, this year's draft.
Oh, okay.
Bryce Message. So
nice. Okay.
Was kind of a borderline first-round talent, probably first-round talent. Brewers were able to funnel some more money down to him. They paid him $2.5 million. And 6'4", 210, like looks the part of a frontline starter.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some stuff he's got to work through. Didn't even make his pro debut, so he's going to be a step behind. But if they follow the same path with Noth, he could be pitching in Carolina this year. Fastball that touches, mid 90s with a hard slider. You're 18. Like, you're working on stuff. Who he was when they drafted him, who he's going to be when they unleash him this year, it could be entirely different. But more like the prototypical pitching body, which they don't have a ton of, right? I mean, you look at their their pitching prospects. Obviously, Mizrahi.
They're all slight, yeah.
Well, is a dude at 6'7", but otherwise it's 6 feet. You mentioned Logan Henderson, who's not even 6 feet. Josh Nothless is 6'1". Bishop Letson is 6'4", but we're not going to talk too much about him. But that's the thing. Like, this is a guy that has a chance to be a very someone that pitches playoff games if he reaches the ceiling, right? He's got his uncle that's the pitching coach for the
Yep.
Pirates. Like he's got it, like the bloodline thing too going for him. So
Yep.
I don't feel like there's going to be like, oh, professional baseball is too big for him because he's been around it. Again, would he have been my number 10 if I did 15? Hard to say. But I only did 10, and I wanted to get both him and Noth on there. The other guy that just missed, if we're going to talk about it, Louis Lara, who I was high on last year.
Yeah.
I didn't have him on my list this year.
Yeah. I like the message pick. It makes a lot of sense. Guys, I considered, Jeremy, before we kind of wrap up this Brewer segment here, I consider Brock Wilken. Luis Pena is another international signee who's going to take off in 2025, had a really strong 2024. Craig Yoho is going to absolutely be at the back of the Brewers bullpen at some point this year. He is Devin Williams 2.0, literally, with that same freaky changeup. I just couldn't feature him because he's a shoo-in to be a relief pitcher. But absolutely worth a mention. So let me ask you this while we're kind of summarizing the Brewer system here, and then we'll quickly finish with the listener question. Is it fair to say, one of my takeaways from, talking through guys and then listening to you talk through guys was, we know that the Brewer system is good. There's 4 top 100 caliber guys. Something that excites me personally is there's like 5 or 6 names that you could throw out who you could easily envisage being in their top 10 this time next year, making their way onto top 100 lists, having breakout type seasons. It feels like there's a really intriguing pool of talent that's either on the very young side or in the very lower levels of the minors, or both. Is that a takeaway that you had as well, talking through this Brewers list?
Yeah, I think the one thing that there isn't a ton of is like right now impact major league guys.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the guys that are going to play, like some of these guys have already played in the majors, but you don't have like the guys that are knocking on the door right now that are going to be high impact. Mizorowski, you can make that argument potentially, but Yoho might be the one that does impact them in the bullpen soon. The other names, like Logan Henderson, you mentioned him, but I feel like more back of the rotation guy, which you obviously you need them,
Right.
But do they have any pitchers that project in the next couple of years as a like top 3 starter? They're hard to find.
Right.
Do we have any names on here at all that we can be like, you can plug him in this spot in the next couple of years?
Not necessarily.
I don't think there's any. And so that isn't necessarily horrible because I think there's versatility that we're still, where's Cooper Pratt play? Where's Mate play? Where do these guys fit? But yeah, I mean, that's no slight on the organization that there's a lot of talent in there. I think there'll be a lot of competition for at-bats, not just the major league level, but working down, through the minors as well.
100%. Okay, well, why don't we finish with a listener question? I always appreciate people sending them in. Jeremy, maybe you want to tee this one up because this is like a nerd out question that I feel well equipped to answer.
Yep. Yeah, I'm gonna fire it right at you. Twins take ass on I'm never gonna call it X on Twitter. What do you think of Twins left-handed prospect Michael Carpenter?
Yeah, so we talked last week, right, about I think Cody Christie sent in a great question around like who is a guy who might jump up multiple levels. Carpenter is like a super sleeper dark horse candidate for that this year, and this is a area of the draft that I'm interested in the Twins exploring more. So Michael Carpenter went to Madison Tech, which is a D2 school, was the D2 pitcher of the year. He's a left-hander, finished the year with a 1.03 ERA, 0.8 whip, and struck out 111 dudes in 78 and 2/3 innings, which is obviously ridiculous. Like, he's too good for that level of competition. So lefty, as we mentioned, 80 89 to 93 miles per hour fastball, which is a little bit of a vague range. I don't really like. We'll come back to that in a second. Seems like a really deceptive delivery too, which is to his advantage. Really good curveball. Seems like he can spin it. Has good feel for a changeup already. He was slated to go to East Carolina um, in the season following the 2024 draft, which is a school renowned for doing very well with pitching development. You just look at their track record over the last 10 years. And the Twins signed him in the 11th round for right around $500,000. And that's significant because that's very beginning of the 5th round money. So they paid Michael Carpenter handsomely to get him out of that commitment to East Carolina and get him to turn pro. I think I'll be really interested. Like, pay attention to the Twins player development account this spring and pay attention to whether they're posting clips of him, because looking at that velocity range on his fastball of 89 to 93, my guess is what, Jeremy? They're going to do what they always do, which is
add 6 miles an hour.
Exactly. So they're adding like a few ticks of that. He's throwing his fastball 92, 94. Then if he already has a good arsenal in place, he's going to be someone who moves quickly and thrives. And so this is a Brewers-esque drafting move, right? To draft someone who no one's ever heard of pitching prospect-wise, like JUCO guy, D2 guy, who has traits and attributes they think that they can kind of polish up. The Twins clearly felt really strongly about this guy, pitched locally, signed him for a decent sum of money. Michael Carpenter, absolutely someone to keep an eye on, and another intriguing left-handed pitching prospect to add to the list, which includes Connor Prelip and Dason Hill, who are also going to see debut in 2025. So excited to follow that cluster of guys.
Just to put a bow on that, though, Madison Tech, like their opponents sometimes, the guys that come off the bus, they didn't even know they were playing baseball that day. I mean, they're playing against, Mike Carpenter. So that level is not exactly a high level of
right.
of competition. So I mean, it's still impressive, but yeah, I want to see him against guys that are like, baseball players.
100%. And I think the commitment to East Carolina, right, that's like a very strong pitching-rich D1 program,
Right.
is something to hang your hat on. But yeah, absolutely, we'll see how it looks now that he's turned pro. That'll be the acid test as it is for any guy. Jeremy, we're going to wrap up here. Quick housekeeping before we get done. Really appreciate folks supporting the show. You can find us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. On Blue Sky now at Destination the Show, YouTube channel, the handle is at Destination the Show. All of our stuff gets uploaded there. And if you want to send us questions, tweet us, do whatever the Blue Sky equivalent of tweeting is. Send us an email.
We got one of those.
We got a very, very, very kind email this week from someone who's really nice. It made me think it was a prank, but really appreciate the kind words. The email address is destinationtheshow@gmail.com. We will be back this time next week. This is part 1 of 3. We're going to be digging into Cubs prospects this time next week. We'll do our usual roundup of news, notes, and cover anything important that happens in the meantime. Until next week, everybody stay warm. We'll catch you soon.